Hey, everybody. This is the Kingslingers Live in Bangor recording. Due to the limitations of the venue, the audio quality is maybe not the best, but we hope that you enjoy it nonetheless. Here is our interview with Robin Furth, the introduction of the library, for which the event raised $13,000, and then a Q&A with the live audience. I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, that's you guys. Children of mine. We're actually here, y'all. We have experienced a couple of technical difficulties. So for those of you who were here last night, you're going to see me do the old mic to the TV in a second. So we're going to have to... It's going to be just fine, though. So I want to let you guys know the raffle tickets are finny. We are not selling any more raffle tickets. We'll be doing that. We'll be pulling the raffle after the show. We do have more merch. Please take a tote bag if you don't already have one, because we have so many. Also, just a quick reminder that we do have library cards in the back, and I encourage everyone to make sure to pick up your Derry Public Library card and remember the curfew. So, you've seen my face enough on this stage. For those of you who put yourself through the punishing trivia rounds that we had last night. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Scott Daly and Mr. Matt Freeman.
Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers! Media podcast journeying to Stephen King's Dark Tower and beyond. I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by my best friend, my brother from another mother, and the guy who puts bang in Bangor. It's Mr. Matt Freeman.
Happy to see everybody, all these beautiful faces out here.
This is weird. Now, do you know what podcasting is? You sit in a room, sometimes the lights aren't even on, and you talk to a computer, and your friend's voice is coming out of the other side, and then suddenly, 3 years later, how many years later, you are on a stage in front of like 100-something people. Talking to all y'all. It's been, oh my gosh, it's been an incredible weekend. Thank you all for coming. This has been... We have people here from all over the country, I think 28 states. 28 states. Some people from Canada. Which I guess it's not too far away from here. And I believe there's someone from London here. Is that true?
They not make it.
Oh no. Well, there was Germany. That's
Thanks for coming.
yeah. Thank you. Oh gosh, thank you everyone for coming. This has been. I mean, it's only like half over, but it's already been like the best weekend of my life. It's been really awesome. Y'all have said so many nice things to us, and as you know, every time we read those reviews at the end of the show, we don't do good with people saying nice things to us. So it's been just incredible. Matt got here. Hey, Matt. So just as like a thought experiment.
Go.
When you have to be somewhere, like Friday night, what time should you plan?
At least 48 hours beforehand.
The important part, though, is you made it, man. And I think everyone here is so happy that you made it.
So I feel good about it, actually.
So we got a lot of fun stuff planned for y'all tonight. The first thing we wanted to do was just give a special thanks to SK Tours, who took us on. They sponsored this whole event for us, and they took us on an incredible tour today. I mean, just an awesome tour. It's so good that I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And I know that there's some of you people who think maybe, oh, well, he's already done the tour, so we're seeing Scott doing the tour the second time and Matt doing the tour the second time, but we were so nervous about this show that we weren't really listening.
It really is
We
great.
didn't really know what we were saying.
I knew it. No, they put on an incredible tour, and those of you that are going to get to do it tomorrow, I think you're going to have just an awesome time. So we can't wait to hang out with y'all again and re-experience that fun. It's gonna be really great.
Yeah, I knew that that Derry was based on Bangor, but after going on the tour, I realized that Derry is based on Bangor.
Yeah, the standpipe. Matt, what's a standpipe?
It's a water tower made out of wood.
So proud of you. But we're here kind of for a special reason, though. We're not just here to talk about Stephen King. We're also here to donate some money. So we are here for the Bangor Public Library. And I believe we have a special presentation from the Bangor Public Library from Siobhan. Are you ready to come up and give a presentation?
Grab a microphone. Grab it here. Wait, take this.
Okay. I do the social media, so this isn't really my favorite thing. But I'll try. Bear with me. So I've entitled this A Library Love Story. We go to the next one. Because, of course, they met at the library up at the university. This is them as extras in a film. He was credited as Hoagie Man. I love this picture. Anyway, so they both worked as the library students. Fast forward. They got married and they came to Bangor, and they would bring their children to the Bangor Public Library. Sometimes, in this article, they would fall down on the way to the library. All right, the next one. About the library, this building, if you go on the tour, you'll see it, has been in existence since 1913. Before that, it was housed in little buildings around downtown. Then there was a big fire, and it all disappeared. This is the inside of the library. This is the death couch of Hannibal Hamlin. He was the vice president under Lincoln, and he died on that couch. So some people come just to see that couch. Okay, the next one. There's some stuff you'd see in the library if it was open on Sunday, which is not. Sorry. Talking about how much they've done for the library. The next one. So what happened was there was an article that the stairs in the front of the library were eroding, and we're going to have to close the library. So Tabitha just comes in one day and says, I heard you have a problem. I think I can help you. And she said, I'm going to give you $2 million, and we're going to raise more money from the city and the rest of the community. And that's exactly what they did. So Tabitha, I really want to credit Tabitha. She was on the board of trustees. She was on the building committee. She was really, Tabitha really did a lot for the library. Next one. But Stephen helped too. Did anybody watch this Jeopardy episode? It was us. He raised money for us. And they would do things around town. And that's how we got our stairs fixed. The next one. He also published, he purchased this building for us. It was a theological seminary building. And this is where the last copy of a book in the state of Maine goes. So all the libraries decide they want to keep a book. It's not really circulating, but they don't want to get rid of it. It goes into this building. And we're in charge of that. Okay, the next one. Then we have problems with our roof. We keep on having problems with the dome. So again, they fundraised for us, and they also helped us expand the children's section. We have an atrium where you can come and get coffee. So they did a lot to help us with the next renovation. They didn't just help us. These are just some of the libraries that helped around the state of Maine. So this is why this really is a library love story. And Maine is the most rural state in the United States. So some of these libraries, they're in the post office, they're in City Hall, and if something happened to them, that community doesn't have a library anymore. So next slide. These are the kind of things they would pay for. not very exciting. Replace the windows, fix the roof, new carpet, HVAC, but this is what allowed a lot of these libraries to keep going. Next one. And of course, Stephen has also been very vocal on an important cause to libraries, book banning. So he doesn't, he makes sure he makes his opinion heard, which we all appreciate. And the last one. Did you do this at trivia night?
We did.
Yeah, so I got so much fun taking them to see all the books. We have a huge collection in so many languages. So I just want to say I'm blown away when Jody and Samantha contacted me a year ago. I had no idea it would be this amazing. So thank you to everyone for showing up, and thank you from the Bangor Public Library.
I think we have a very, very large novelty check. So I never understood the reason for these things, and then we were talking a couple weeks ago, and it was like, well, do we just hand her a little piece of paper? It's weird. So we had this very large novelty check created. You guys, this is you guys, $13,000.
And we did talk about what we're going to do with this, and it makes sense. Audiobooks.
Yeah! All Stephen King, right?
Of course.
So yeah, I mean that's again, that's all you. I mean, we never in our wildest dreams thought this thing would be this big and that we would raise that much money, and that's because of you guys and your excitement, and we are absolutely blown away. You guys want to talk about Stephen King? We are so absolutely thrilled to have a very special guest here tonight to sit down and chat a little bit about The Dark Tower, about Stephen King, and about a little bit of everything. So, Robin Furth is here, everybody.
Because I have one, because I love the Bangor Public Library, and I left it at home. But I use it, it's wonderful.
You get one from the 1950s, right over there. It works.
That's exciting, really. So
Here we are, yeah.
Should we sit?
Sit down. Should we sit? When I podcast, I sit down. So.
This is much better.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming. Thank you
it's a
for being
pleasure.
here with us. I think we talked, it was 4 months ago or so,
Yes.
just planning what we were going to talk about. And I think one of the first things that jumped on my mind was obviously the Dark Tower.
Yes.
And your concordance as I was going through it with Matt, just to remember things, and it was my Bible going back to it. We too close together. If you look at my copy, it's written in and I treated the book very badly.
I go back to it myself because it's such a huge series and there are so many characters, and I often want to check myself, say, okay, do I want to, I just want to make sure, especially if I was doing the comics or I was writing an article, I go back and I double check, and I think I'm a bit obsessive compulsive when it comes to the detail, but not a bad thing.
Well, I think that, the Dark Tower, it's big and it's expansive, and it's sometimes inconsistent, and that's why I'm curious when you're compiling something like that and trying to get all the facts of the story straight.
Yes, there's something when Steve would go back and change something, it's like, oh, there are other worlds than these. But he is remarkably consistent when you think about the size of the universe and multiverses, and it always amazes me.
And when he returns to Dark Tower in a later book, or makes a reference to it, or pulls from another book into the Dark Tower series, it's amazing the size of his inner world, and I'm always amazed.
Yeah, and I think that one of the cool things about it with me has always been, it's defined, but it's also kind of loosely defined. It's like we don't get to see every nook and cranny, every corner of everything. So I'm just curious, like, as you were trying to compile all the factual information, and he does change his mind and move stuff around, but also he creates things like the Beam Guardians, for example, and he kind of tells you what they are and where they came from, but he kind of doesn't get into a lot of the details. So like when you're trying to put something together that has kind of all the details, how do you kind of find the
reread. Go back to other books that mention, and then sometimes worst comes to worst, ask Steve. Hey, excuse me. But yeah, so he was always really helpful with that.
If you ask him, you have a question about something like the Beam Guardian, for example, is he just I know exactly what, you just spout it off immediately, or is he let me think about that for a bit?
Usually, often it's by email, because we both are writers, so it's great to write and ask a question. He writes back, and so he knows his worlds. He really knows his worlds, and so he'll send back information. And sometimes, I was trying to think. One of the Guardians, I was asking him a question. This was way back when he was working on the books, and he named one of the Guardians, and it wasn't in anything that he'd written yet. I was amazed. I'm writing that one down. in the concordance right now. Yeah, so the worlds exist in his mind, and it's amazing. So I'm always running to catch up.
That's so cool. Yeah. That's so cool. So one of the Guardians in your book is perhaps one that he's never actually.
Well, no, he did name it. He came up in the final book, but I'm trying to think which one it was. But yes, he's sometimes there are these amazing pieces of information that will come through that he's thinking about it. He's going to be writing about it, but to actually see it before it appears in a book, that just feels like magic. Yeah. As we all can identify with that. The magic of being in the world, and we've all lived there. It is this other world we all inhabit. What's amazing here, I was asking people when they come up for signings, what's your favorite Dark Tower book, or what's your favorite Stephen King book? There's so many backs and forths, and it's just really interesting to hear what people say.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite Dark Tower book?
It's funny, I always feel guilty when I choose one. But for me, Wizard in Glass really has a special place. I think it's the story of the young Roland. And I spent a lot of time in various things I've written about Roland's journey and his movement from, you have this young man. You see the hardness of what's coming. You do have those glimpses, even with how he treats Susan Delgado, which is tragic. But he still is quite idealistic. And then you see in Little Sisters of Illyria, I always think about the scene with the mutants come and attack him, and he gives warning shots. Mm-hmm. And he shouldn't have given those warning shots, because then they attack him. You think the older Roland wouldn't have given any warning shots. So you watch his transformation into this much harder man, and then you watch him come back from that to reclaim his soul. And I found that incredibly moving as a reader, also as a human being, to have that, how we lose ourselves, how we then have to reclaim our humanity and mistakes we make along the way.
That's one thing I really appreciated about the things that you had written is that not only do they honor the details of this intricate world, but they also honor this deep emotionality and the themes of fate and tragedy. Those came across really strongly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that is something I think about a lot with Roland's story. And I was thinking about it a lot when we were doing the comics, and to think about the journey of the young man and the disappointments and the horrors of what he sees, and even the fact, the one thing I was worried about, I'm not going to give any spoilers. Has everybody been to it? If you haven't, Virginia, I have no guilt about that. But, you think about that with the death of his mother when he shoots his mother, and that was a big spoiler for some. You just think about that, and what for a young person that must feel like, and I loved it when Steve was writing about going back to Wizard and Glass and how he felt like he saw himself as a young man, and when he's like, how can I recapture this story of young love in this younger version of himself, and I'll help you. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? And every writer has to do that journey back in time.
Yeah, I mean, Roland is just probably one of the most incredible characters ever, right? I mean, just the first thing we see him do, the first major event of his story is to let a kid die.
Yes.
And that is like the establishing moment of like here's this guy, root for him. Oh no, he's gonna let a child fall to his death.
Exactly.
And then we have to fall in love with him anyway, and we do. And I think it's what you said.
It's all his faults.
Yeah, it's because we see what made him the way he is.
Yes.
We understand why he turned into a person that would always think, I have to sacrifice everything for what I want.
Yes.
Like, I mean, from David in the first moment to pass his test,
very true.
through to everything, everything is there to be sacrificed towards whatever his goal is, which of course eventually is the tower. And that, like, I think it's incredible that King establishes this character with a moment of monstrosity almost, and then
very true,
and then lets us fall in love with him anyway.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's really interesting you say that, because a few people were talking about their favorite characters from the Dark Tower series, and a few people mentioned Eddie Dean. And you think about when Eddie, he was a junkie when Roland first meets him, and I remember going back through and really paying attention to Eddie's relationship with Roland, and of all the characters, Eddie really sees the dark side of Roland, but then he follows him anyway. It's quite amazing.
Kind of like us, right? I think it's the characters' flaws that endear us to them in a way, make us relate to them. Actually, I mean, Eddie and Roland are both flawed, and
very much so. Yeah.
It's in some sense Roland's flaws that draws Eddie to him. That they're both broken, and they both help each other in that way.
Very much so.
And the Henry Dean part of it, I think, is like he becomes his new Henry Dean.
Yes.
Like he replaces him almost immediately and becomes him. And that's, I think, you see the same flaw that made him follow his brother into all the trouble he follows Roland, and then like getting to see it transform beyond that and become something else and something more, I think is just one of the remarkable parts of his character transformation.
And the haunting of Eddie by Henry.
He never really goes away.
No, he's there, the voice in his head, and we all have that, don't we? Sometimes it's a voice you really wish you could get rid of, but it's still there, talking to you and informing your life.
See, you mentioned the comics you worked on, and I thought those were really fascinating. I really enjoyed reading them. What was it like, I guess, kind of getting the go-ahead to say, like, okay, you, Robin, can now explore a part of the story that hasn't been explored before.
Very scary. Very scary, because when you, as we all do, you love the books, you want to do justice to the books, and that balance of being really true to the books and then adding more to Roland's younger days. And I would go back through the books, combing for details, any details from Roland's younger life, to just try and keep that chronology, and be honest and be true, stand and be true to the novels and to the characters. And it was amazing because Steve was very clear when in the first meeting, it was a telephone meeting, Marvel, Steve came, and I was there, I was on a phone link. And it's one of those moments, because I didn't realize I know I was going to be doing research and consultation, but I didn't know I was going to be one of the writers. Steve knows I write and I publish, but I didn't realize that because I'd never written comics, love comics, but I'd never written. So we're on the phone, and Steve said, oh yeah, I want Robin to be one of the writers. I'm like, I can't do that. He's like, yes, you can. And it was funny because I was like talking myself out of a job that I really wanted. And I finally had to calm down. And I think he did say, calm down. And then it was a labor of love. And I still remember when, we luckily had a long lead up for those, I think we had a full year before the first comic. And that was great because I had a very steep learning curve. And there was a whole team, and I had a fellow writer, Peter David, and we had 2 wonderful artists. And I remember when Jay Lee sent me the first drafts of various characters. I think he sent me Court and Roland and Susan Delgado. And so I had these, and I was actually in London at the time, and Steve was coming to do a reading, and he was promoting Lisi's story. So I got to see him. I had these in my hot little hands. I had these sketches, so I got to show him those first sketches, and it was quite amazing because he was looking at Jay Lee's, black and whites, and he was like, "Wow, it's like the character stepped from my imagination onto the page." And I thought you couldn't get higher praise, so I told Jay that. And for me, one of the most magnificent images when you go to where Roland and Court are facing off, and Jay has a series of very small images of Court. And I just think they're fantastic. They capture Court's personality. They capture the tension of that moment and the tension of that fight. And I thought that was just so brilliant. Endless respect for the artists who brought it to life like that on the page.
Yeah, so I don't know a lot about how writing for comics works. So I mean, was it kind of they brought you the art, or you kind of directed the story, and how it
started with me.
Started with you,
and that was scary too. So basically, what I did, and it was a learning process, and I would take the story and break it down into scenes, and I was very visual in my descriptions, and I would include dialogue from the books so that the dialogue would be there, so we were exact as possible. And it was really great because Jay Lee he said to me, no, it's good because you are seeing it, and because you're seeing it, I can see it. And that's so important. If anybody out there who writes comics, you realize that what you describe, they draw. So if you mess up your description, they do something completely different. But Jay was brilliant with that, with just taking my breakdowns. And then I learned to do it more as a page and panel breakdown, which was really good. So it's a really different process, a lot of description. There are different ways to do it. We could do a whole discussion on, whether you do the DC style, the Marvel style, and what you do with your comics. So there are a lot of ways to approach it. But that's how we did it. So it would start with me, and then it would go to Jay Lee, who would break it down into panels and pages. Is it mine?
I turned mine off.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So they do talk back to us, don't they? But then it would go to Jay, and then it would simultaneously go to Peter and to Richard. Richard was doing the color, and you see that gorgeous color in those comics, and that's Richard Islam. And then Peter would take it, and he'd do the dialogue on the page and the descriptions of the word balloons and the captions. So we were a whole team, and we'd go back and forth and round, and we'd have our in-jokes and things we weren't able to put in the comics. And originally, I remember with that first run, Marvel wanted it to be 6 issues, and I did 8. And they're like, Robin, you can't have 8. I said, but you need it, there's so much story. So we had to compromise and do 7. That's why it's 7 and 5, and the long road home is 5. So that's why.
So when it came time to, I guess, make changes or add characters or kind of flesh out, parts of the story that, no one had ever heard of before. Like we get a lot of, there's parts of it that were very fleshed out in the story, like his fight with Court and I guess the Battle of Jericho a little bit was a little detailed. Like how did you approach kind of adding those things? Was it like, Steve, can I do this? Can I add this character? Because there was a big new character added to those comics, right?
Yes, there were a few that we added in, and in that initial conversation, talking to Steve on the phone, he was talking about he wanted to start with the Roland winning his guns, and then he wanted to go up to the Battle of Jericho Hill, and so he was talking a lot in that conversation about how he saw the Battle of Jericho Hill, and so I was taking frantic notes and trying to keep everything to how he saw it. And that was quite challenging, what to add, what would feel like it was still honoring the characters. Eileen was one that we really fleshed out, because she's a very small part in the books, but we fleshed her out. In part because I was thinking about Suzanity, and I thought that energy of the female gunslinger, how do we get that into these earlier comics? Because there are a lot of people who love comics and aren't that into novels, and one of the greatest things was when people would come into the comics and they'd say, now I'm reading the novels and I love them. And I thought, isn't that great? But I was hoping to catch that energy that would actually get them into the books, So hopefully that's what happened.
I mean, I thought so. I thought they were so fun to read. Like the Battle of Jericho Hill is like something that I think everyone when you read about it in the Dark Tower, it's like, I wish I could read like that. I want to experience that. And I think the coolest parts of the comic was just getting to see that.
That was it was really moving thing to do the Battle of Jericho Hill, because there is so much death, so much destruction, and it really is the end of a society. So,
Yeah, maybe for those who haven't read these comics, they're actually quite powerful.
Thank you.
In my heart, I consider them just part of the series, because they connect emotionally and character-wise, and they're just perfect to me. I love them.
That's really, we were trying so hard to catch that energy.
So you were saying you kind of went back and forth with the team. Did it get down to like you see the scene a certain way and you describe the way you see it, or do you write something and then the artist conceptualizes how that's going to look?
It's really interesting, because I think Jay Lee spent a lot of time thinking about the look, and I think he really felt that pressure. He's a really big King fan too, so he really wanted to capture Steve's world. And he was saying how the hardest thing, Jay said, for him to create was Susan Delgado, because he said he loves creating broken things, ancient things, decaying things. So like a Gilead that's already collapsing loves, but this beautiful young woman that Roland loves, he's like, oh my God, how am I going to draw? But he did, and she's beautiful, and she has a real life and energy to her. But I did find we had a really good team, and I felt like there was a real communication. I think because everybody on the team, they were fans, and so when we talked, we did see the same thing. And that was amazing, I think, also with Jay Lee. I have such respect for him as an artist. And so I think we had a good communication. It's like what I saw, he also saw. And sometimes you create something like that. The backdrops were just gorgeous. And the color, like I said, was just gorgeous. They worked together. The folks at Marvel were always saying that, Richard and Jay, when they came together, they made a third artist. That was different from either one of them alone, and was really powerful. And I thought that was true. It was amazing.
This is a bit of a tangent, but you were talking about Susan Delgado, and I have to ask you a question. Stephen King. What is it about Susan?
I wondered that myself. I don't know.
I think we had a question on the trivia yesterday, or a series of questions that were a trick that it was like, here's all these characters and name what happened to them, and they were all Sues or Susans that were horribly killed.
Yeah, if I find that out, I will tell you.
Please.
I don't know. But yeah, Susan is a really tragic figure. Mm-hmm. Her love is so profound, and yet you think about her end, but she haunts him forever.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Maybe it was revenge,
So my favorite topic on the Dark Tower is the idea of Ka and
yes.
Fate more generally.
Yes.
And over time, I've come to see more and more in the text, and just, I think broadly in other things King has written, the fact that he's really interested in the idea of fate, but it's never quite clear whether fate is a sure thing, or whether you can defeat your fate. I was wondering if you would comment, since the Song of the Turtle sings to you as well.
That's an honor. I think about that a lot myself, because there's that idea that Kyle constantly moves forward, it doesn't change, and I always think about what's done can't be undone. And that's something that I always think of. But there is the occasion when things do change, or there are other worlds where things are different. So, is it final? I don't know. That's something I grapple with myself. But that's something because is everyone here, I'm sure we all think about that. And the number 19, your experiences with that?
I think he intentionally leaves it up to us to try to decide.
I agree.
Well, I don't know if he is sure either. Like, I think a lot of these books are like examining his feelings with this, with like, I mean, we talk so much about the way evil in King's universe shows itself, and then there's great big cosmic evil, but most of the worst things that are done in these books are done by people, and sometimes they're influenced by that cosmic evil, but it is people and choices and the mundane bad things that people do. And so I think like all of these with Ka, with fate, with like why do people do things? Why do people do bad things? Exactly. It seems like one of the fundamental questions of the Dark Tower and of all his books.
And it comes over and over in Steve's books, and I was thinking about that because I was thinking about it actually in terms of the Bill Hodges and then Holly books, which I've done a lot of work on as well. And one of the things I thought about is that no one writes about a small town with more affection than Stephen King. But no one captures the darkness, which is actually the darkness of human nature, the darker side. He captures that too. And so that question of what is evil and how much is it in us, which is a question we're all facing all the time when we look at what unfolds in the world around us.
Yeah, I was hitting home in the current book we're reading, 11/22/63.
Yes.
There's almost like two towns. One of them is just an awful place. Actually, there's several towns. We have two very bad towns, and then there's one really good town.
Yeah, the town of Jody in that book is like no small town he's ever written about, because it's like, this time I'm going to write a small town that there's really no underbelly of darkness in it. It's just good. It's just a place of good. And I think he wonderfully compares that with the horrible, horrible Dallas, Texas. I'm from Dallas. But he writes about Dallas in that book like it's the worst place in the world. I get it. But I think that's very true.
Yeah, towns and cities, which are basically made up of people. And holding up a mirror, I think, often to us to say, what choice will you make? Like even with Roland, it's a choice. It's always a choice. What choice does he make? And you can make with Jake, when he lets Jake fall, that haunts him. It was a very bad choice. How can he go back and change it?
Yeah, but that's so, like, I agree, but I love the constant refrain of the Dark Tower is like if Ka wills it, right? It's like, it seems to be this, like, there is always a choice, but there are characters multiple times saying, I don't have a choice, like, this is the way the universe works, and I think there is a contradiction there, and there's a lot of, yeah.
Really a tension between the two, between free will and fate. And that's something we never know, do we? We're always questioning that ourselves, the things that happen. Is it foreseen or is it chance? Where do these things, where's Ka's wheel moving toward? Can it roll this way and then be knocked sideways? Go a little bit to the one side or another. Yeah.
I think King certainly punishes his characters who throw up their hands and say it's all in fate's hands.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. What is it? We talked, I think, when we finished the Dark Tower, I think one of the conversations Matt and I had was, it's almost greater than the sum of its parts. Like there's some kind of ineffable quality to it that makes it unique and different. I'm curious, what do you think? What is so special about these books, this series as a whole? What is it like?
I think it's everything he draws upon. There's a lot of mythology, the turtle. It echoes through different mythologies. The idea of the tower, and you have the world tree. It echoes, these are almost archetypal dream images that we share and that go through different cultures. So I really feel like he's really consciously drawing on that. You think about the influences of like the spaghetti western, which is archetypal to our society. Even Ed Dorn, the poet who wrote The Gunslinger, he was really influenced by him. I asked him, I said, Ed Dorn, he came and read at the University of Maine in the 60s, and one of Steve's teachers, Bert Hatley, was a huge Ed Dorn fan. And Steve said, yes, I read that book over and over until the book was in tires. And I thought, yeah, that's another influence. So I think he's very aware of what he's drawing upon and the effect that has on him and the effect it has on us as readers. And I do think that is one of the effects of an epic. Something that is so large that we read for almost like over years, and that's created over years, or with other epics, ancient epics over lifetimes. You think how many people, if it starts out as an oral tale, it changes, it grows, it's honed. So I think there's some of that too. I think it's actually really fascinating for that reason. All that goes into it, all he draws upon.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about the way he writes, and we've talked about this before, but he has all these references. There's poems and there's books, and he's constantly Lord of the Rings. But I love the way he does this. It's never in like a oh, you have to read all these things before you can understand what I'm talking about. It's always like I love these poems. I love these stories, and I'm pulling this all into my world. And it's like I'm inviting you to go, oh, I've not read Shardik before, and now I kind of want to try out that book. And so it's not like, there's some people when they write and reference all these other things, it's like it's almost a litmus test of like how well read are you, and if you're not well read enough, you won't understand what I'm talking about here. But it's never that. And
no, it's really accessible, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was never like a big poetry guy. I like analyzing things, and I'm looking at poetry like I don't understand what this means. I don't like it. But just like covering the Dark Tower and having to really sit down and think about the poems that he includes or references, it's like made me like poetry more. Yeah, it's really cool. So
a lot of William Butler Yeats in there, turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer, and so you see these poems and the resonances. And one of the things that's really interesting about Stephen King and the echoing of a lot of books and a lot of poetry, he's a real reader. And Bert Hatley, who is, because of Bert that I ended up meeting Steve and working with Steve, because he was Steve's supervisor and he was my supervisor. So when Steve needed an assistant, Bert recommended me, for which I'm eternally grateful. But one of the things Bert said is he said, even when Steve was an undergraduate, he always had a book. He was always reading wherever he was. And so he knew, Steve was already publishing as an undergraduate, which is really amazing. But he knew he was going to make it as a writer because he was such a reader. And that is so essential. My husband teaches creative writing, and one of the things he said he really tries to emphasize is if you want to write, you also have to read. It's a conversation, through time. And that is amazing. That's how we learned, like you were saying, about other writers, other poets, other books. Oh, that's interesting. I can read that.
It's interesting because to hear King speak about the way that he writes, you wouldn't think that he is consciously referencing all these things. And it's funny because me and Scott always fall into this trap of saying, like, well, clearly he intended to do this, and this is an allusion to this. And
we don't know what we're talking about.
and sometimes I think, like, well, I think maybe he's just such an avid reader. He reads so much that all of that is just soaked into him, and then it comes out, and he's not. Intentionality is a vague thing. It's like it's a gray area of what is intentional and what is just something that came out of him, and then he recognized it. What do you think about this? Just knowing his process.
I think that when things are absorbed and something new is created, all that knowledge almost has to go in the back brain, and it feeds into the we because it's very natural. That's what I think. I think that a lot of writers do that, and I think that Steve does it beautifully, bringing in all that he reads and all that he knows, and it's just part of how he's seeing that particular scene or that particular character. It's amazing. He's been doing this for so long and he's so skilled. His drafts are so clean. And I'm like, oh my God. He said to us, this is really intimidating. He's like, no, everybody's different. And he's very generous that way with all writers. And if you look at what he says about different writers and how he supports people, he's an incredibly generous individual. Both, as you're saying, Stephen and Tabitha, both of them, what they support, but also the writers they support. And often you don't hear about it, but they're there, writing and supporting people.
Yeah, that's actually, I've learned that on this trip. I mean, I was already obviously in touch with him as a writer, but on this trip and going on the tour, realized what a huge philanthropist he is.
Completely. And a lot of times you don't even know until you find out. I went to the Grand in Ellsworth, and I didn't realize that Steve and Tabitha King rebuilt that place. And I was so amazed. And there's the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation. They give money to writers and artists who are facing real hardship because of medical emergencies. I mean, it's amazing what they do and who they help.
Yeah, and the fact that they don't want their name on it.
Yes, they're doing it because it needs to be done. And that, I have endless respect for both of them and what they do. They're creative people and they're generous people, and they do so much for the community and the greater world.
You did mention that you did research on Holly, I think, when we talked.
Oh, yes.
And I wanted to kind of ask you what it's like to kind of do research on some of his darker books. I don't think we'll go into specific spoilers about Holly.
Have people read Holly? Yeah, okay. Cannibalism. That was me. I did days. And I was like, I was finding out I was cannibalism in humans, cannibalism in cultures, cannibalism in animal kingdom. And tiger sharks. I tell this story and people are like, that's disgusting. Okay, so tiger sharks. I discovered I think it's the tiger shark. The female conceives many embryos, and they're in her womb swimming around, and they eat each other. Only one is born, and it's really a chubby little thing that's eating all its brothers and sisters. But that is gross, and I found a photo of it. And someone actually, the researcher, did put a camera inside of a female tiger shark. And sharks are pretty scary looking things, but these babies are the most terrifying things. They're all teeth and all eyes. And I said, Steve, I'm going to send you. He said, I don't want to see that. I'll probably watch it. Okay, send. I wanted to gross someone else out because it was just incredible. But that probably, I've done a lot of challenging, fascinating, disgusting research. My dad was a pathologist, my grandfather was a pathologist. I grew up with, we talk about dissections all around the kitchen table, you know what I mean? My husband, when he first came to my house for dinner, he could not eat. Oh yeah! Cutting up their meat, talking about someone.
So how does that work? Does he just like shoot you an email and say, I'm writing this book about cannibalism?
Well, he'll often ask me a question and then he'll say, okay, can you find out about this? And I won't necessarily know why. I say, okay.
So just like vague questions about, please look up how to eat someone.
And if you ate a human body, how many calories do you ingest? I don't know. But I can find out.
You end up on the FBI list.
There was one point, and it was actually Dark Tower, and Steve was asking me about weapons, because I think he was thinking about what kind of weapons they could use in a war against the wolves, and so I was doing all this research on weapons and bullets, and I thought, I'm going to end up on this. Someone's going to think I'm really crazy. But yeah, that was, I did it anyway, and I thought, I hope they, But I looked up other nice things too.
So you have to, like, I guess in your mind, kind of piece together what you think the story is about as you're answering these
Luckily,
one-off
helped
questions.
show me, like, I was like, okay, this is what it went to. And that's
Okay.
really great.
Oh, that's cool.
Gratifying to see, even if it's like just a little bit, it's like, oh, there it is. That's a lot of fun. And to feel like I did something, to help this with this world. That's just so gratifying.
So how did, like, when the concordance kind of, how did that all start to come together? Did it start, I think I read it started as kind of, you were just putting notes together for Stephen, and then...
Yes, okay, so I was a graduate student at the University of Maine, and Bert Hatton was one of my supervisors. It was after Stephen had his accident, so, he had a hard time, he was long recovery, and he was working on writing, and he had put not a challenge, but kind of like an invitation, for people to write a story based on what he was talking about. And so, of course, he got lots and lots of different, manuscripts, and huge. So we needed somebody to help just go through the manuscripts, put them in piles, who is doing what he wants and who isn't. And so I was the graduate student, got that job because he wanted to help the graduate student. Yes. So I was doing that, and then the last day, when I was going in to the office to hand in the last box that I'd sorted through, and it was really snowy, and I lost my power, and I hadn't showered, and really smelled, and I went into the office, and who's there? Stephen King. And I went, I'd never met him in person, and I mostly had gone through Marcia, was working with him. And, but I got there, and I was amazed and tongue-tied, and he said, oh, do you want some more work? I'm like, yes, please. And he said, I'm going back to the Dark Tower series, but I need someone to make lists of all the characters and places and page references. And he said, have you read Dark Tower? I was like, no. I read everything else. I hadn't read Dark Tower. It was really horrifying. I said, that's okay. I'll give you the books. Give you the books. And I went home and I read The Man in Black Blood Across the Desert, and I couldn't say my father, and I just was in love. And so he said he just wanted lists. I wanted to be a folklorist. All my life, I've studied English because my parents said folklore, you'll never get a job, Robin. So I studied English. And I started going to Midworld, and I thought, this is what I want to do. I listed all the story, all the history of characters, the games, the customs, everything. And I didn't, this isn't what he asked me for, this is always what I do. He asked me one thing, I do. And I gave him this book bound in black. I did all the characters, all the places, histories, genealogies, everything, bound it in black, made a door for the front, and it said the writer, and then you turned it around, it said the writer back, but that was really tough to do. And then I found a key in my grandfather's study. So it had to be a found key. And I went upstairs and I opened my grandfather's drawer, and he was long dead. And there was a key. And so I taped it to the front. The key will open the door. And I thought he's going to think I'm a nut, or he's going to think it's okay. And he laughed. And he said, okay, we'll carry on. I'm going to give you my manuscript in pieces, and you're going to keep building this big, it's like the beauty for me, because he'd been fighting for decades, he just wanted to make sure that everything was, consistent. So I was, as a wannabe folklorist, Midworld's folklorist, yes, thank you. So that's what we did, and that was amazing to see these characters grow, the places grow. Yeah, so that's how it started.
And how did, you go from there to, hey, we're going to publish this thing, actually?
Yeah, that was pretty wild, because I was writing it for Steve. It was a writer's school, and he talks about that in the introduction, that it was a writer's school. And one of his agents, Ralph Wichinanza, wonderful man who's since passed, who's one of his two major agents, said, have you thought about doing a kind of overview of the Dark Tower, with a list of characters on it? There's a graduate student who's actually doing that right now. And I met Ralph, And that's how it went. So I've been one of the reasons Bert I think chose me. I was a graduate student, but I was a bit older, so I'd gone back, and I'd already been publishing poetry. So he knew that I was very serious, and that I loved horror, and loved the darker side. I was quite obsessed by that kind of thing. So that's how it all started, and my 2-week job has been like 25 years. Oh, 2 weeks!
Sorry, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it's a long story, thank you for that.
It's great. It's just like do a really, really good job if somebody asks you to do something and you'll get to write the Dark Tower Concordance.
Well, I do think I think very often we stop ourselves. You know, you want to do more, but you're afraid, like, will this be too much? Will they think I'm over enthusiastic? Or you know, you don't want to bore someone with, especially when they're really busy. But it is, I think that when you do what you love, you shine, you know, and what the work itself, you know, if it is what it wants to be, that's good. And, you know, for somebody to have the patience to say, yeah, go for it, that's wonderful too.
Yeah, I mean, we talk for 2.5 hours about like 50 pages of a book every week. So I'm constantly worried about boring.
We're all there. We want to hear, you know? And it's great because when people share your passion, because if you're talking to the wrong person, they're going to be like, what? 19? Why do you know what I was talking about 19? Blue car syndrome. All these things, they don't know what you're talking about. The right person.
So outside of Dark Tower, what are kind of your favorite King books? I don't think you have to pick one if you don't want to. I know it's a hard question.
It's really hard, isn't it? I think Holly I love. I do. I think I've worked with Holly for a long time. I love her as a person and how she's grown. Salem's Lot was one of the first for me. So, and some of those early books, because I read them young, so formative. Oh, it's so hard to choose, because I'm going to leave here and think, I guess we're all like, because whenever I ask people, what's your favorite day?
The Tables of Terror.
Yes. Insomnia I loved. And one of the things I've been going back to is short fiction. That is amazing and so varied, even within one collection, so varied. And I think for me, there are some of the short stories that just will live forever, I think. And yeah, and I have a soft spot for vampires.
You happen to have a favorite Bachman book specifically?
That's a tough one. Get back to me. I'll get back to you. I think that for me, I really like the Bachman books. I think for me, the Steve books are the ones I owe my heart those the most.
So you mentioned Holly Gibney, and what is it about her, do you think? I mean, I know he's talked about that there was just something about her that captivated him almost immediately, and he keeps going back. I think he said he's writing another Holly Gibney story, I think. So.
Can't say anything. But Holly, I think it's how she's grown. Like, it's funny because he's talked about that, how she was supposed to be a minor character, and then she just stepped forward and took, really took center stage. And I think we've watched her grow, and that's been wonderful. It's funny, my mind just went back. I was thinking about what you said about Bachman, and I was thinking about the dark half, that split between the writer, having to, and that is a book I absolutely adore. And I always think about Bachman and that as well. Sorry, from Holly to, sorry. But yeah, with Holly, I don't know, what do you think is I mean, I think it is, she's charming, she's so full of self-doubt, but so talented.
I think just like the potential with her was captivating. Like he makes his character and doesn't really know what to do with her yet. She's pretty pretty small role in Mr. Mercedes, which Matt hasn't read yet. Spoilers, Matt.
Oh, we won't say that. You haven't read
I'm not
any of the...
He hasn't read any of the crime stuff yet, no.
Or the dark house, so I'm just.
Well, you've got a treat.
But yeah, I mean, I think just the opportunity to take a character on a journny, like, is so interesting from the beginning.
Watch her grow.
Yeah. She's very unique too. Like she is kind of quirky and weird in her own ways, and has her own challenges and her own things. And yeah, I mean, I know not everyone seems to like Holly as much, but I really enjoyed every book that she's been in. So yeah. I thought Holly was fantastic.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that book.
Really enjoyed working on it with Steve. At times it was but great. And it's also really interesting the cast of characters, that how we've watched them all grow up and grow. And one of the things I love about the Holly books as well is the role that friendship plays. You know, you have these people and they have these bonds. It's not a bond of family, it's a bond of friendship, and it crosses all sorts of boundaries, age and race and background, and yet these friendships are so tight. I love that. Because it is like that in life. Who you love is who you love. You don't have to follow any rules with those things. I'm still going to be obsessed with Richard Buckman when we're back in the movie. We're going to get an email from me. Remember that question?
It's probably one of those really.
What about you? What is your favorite Buckman book?
The Long Walk.
I was going to say that. Yeah, that's the one I was going to say, and I thought, I don't know. But yeah, that's actually on my bedside for reread.
I only read that one the first time a few years ago, and I was just blown away. Like, it's a book that sounds like it's coming from a young man, but also like the skill and what it's doing is remarkable. Like, I couldn't believe how good it was. Even though there's no way someone could walk that fast. I think everyone that reads that book tries it. Maybe let's just see if I can do this. No.
1 mile.
Also, it's interesting. I was thinking about that movement between science fiction, fantasy, dystopia, western. That's something else I love. You know, the movement, not feeling limited by one kind of fiction, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, he feels like he's never kind of happy sticking with one thing. I mean, everyone knows horror, but like...
Yeah, and
I mean...
I didn't even say horror because it was so...
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
but, you know, interspersed with the horror, you have these other genres, which...
Yeah, and sometimes he does books that are just clearly, I just want to do this one thing. I think, like, we just read Doom McKee, which is so gothic and wonderful. Yeah. And now 11/22/63 is like a totally different animal. Going from Doom McKee to 11/22/63 has been wild.
With the research on that, Russ Dorr, who did research for Steve for years, was amazing. You know, he did a lot of research.
It's weird living in Dallas reading that book.
Oh yes, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I've been talking about how, like, I'm sure it's like the people that live in Bangor are reading about Derry. It's
yes.
Like, it's like everywhere. It's like, I know that street. I lived off that street. I know that street. You're really mean to my city.
I remember being a kid and I was at my grandparents' house and I was reading Silence a lot, and it was the middle of the night and everybody was in bed, and all of a sudden I realized that isn't very far from here. And you know it's fiction, but there's always that part of you that's like, oh, I'm going to go to bed now. And I swear, I think a bat came and hung on the window. It took off. But it is strange. But you know, it's funny you should mention that about, you know, for the better or the darker of a story. One of the things as a young person, when I read Stephen King, what I loved was it was in my world. And, you know, it was a world I knew, but it overlapped with the world of dream and horror and sci-fi. And, you know, I'd always, before that, I think I'd read a lot of fantasy and I read a lot of science fiction. I love a good horror story. I love a good haunting. But they always, you know, often they were in other worlds. But to have that come home to me, I loved that because it is the door, isn't it? world we're doing.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Makes our world more haunted, our world more real, you know?
I run into so many people when I tell people I have a Stephen King podcast. Very often the response I get is something like, "Oh, it's too scary. I couldn't even see it." It's like all my favorite. I genuinely love all the books we've read on this project, but probably my top ones are the least supernatural ones and the least scary ones.
Yeah, which ones?
Well, The Long Walk would be the best, like that one, and then Hearth and Atlantis.
Oh, I love that book, yeah.
There's a little bit of supernatural in there, but that's not the point of it, really.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
almost never is the supernatural the point with games.
Right.
I think that's why it
It's
sticks.
part of it's like another level of reality and it adds more meaning. And sometimes it's haunting, sometimes it's a great monster. But it's also, how do we deal with this world and all the unknowns? And how do we deal with the monstrous? That's something I've been thinking about a lot. For me, horror is a way of dealing with the monstrous in the world that we see all the time. How do we make sense of it? It's like fairy tales, there are some really tough lessons in fairy tales about abuse, about murder, about all these awful things in life. And there it is in this story we say is a children's story. But it's a way for us to deal with it, learn it.
Yeah, I think Holly, the novel kind of crystallized that for me. Like looking at it's very clearly a book where King is looking at the world right now and being like, how did we get ourselves here? And trying to understand what type of people would do terrible things and why they would do terrible things and how they would justify. Yeah, and that's reading that book was like, just to look back at every single book, and that's been the journey of his career. It's been like, this is a world in which there are truly incredible things, wonderful things, and I think he writes beautifully about when people help each other and lift each other up, and but there's that darkness and that evil, and the why, and I think that's the central question at the heart of every single one of these books is why do people do these things?
And it's kind of a strange aside, but I was in Boston not long ago, and I saw a sign. It was very nice. It said, "Love everyone, fear no one." And I thought, uh-oh, you're going to end up dead. All of that. Any King reader knows that. But you think about it, there's a lot to fear in the world. You don't want to fear everything because there's so much good and so much kindness. Everybody here, think about that. It's a wonderful thing. We all love horror, but some of the best people love horror because they're willing to deal with it, willing to face it.
So, driving around this town on the tour, I was like, this is a beautiful town.
Yeah.
Why did he portray it that way? And I think he helped make the town into a beautiful place. I'm not saying it wasn't before, but there's like a warning of the darkness that is there, and then also in that very book, in it, there's also interlaced with that the beauty of the relationships and the humanity.
Oh, completely.
Overlaid, those two things are overlaid on top, so it's like
and the bonding of the kids in the book, and I was thinking about that a lot, and you think about anyone who works in a school, you'll see the greatness of the schools, and you see the dark underbelly of the family. And I taught for quite a few years before I went back to grad school, and there are wonderful things, wonderful things, and then there are the awful things that children go through, and that's every time. That's the big mystery, I think, of what we are like human beings. We are capable of such wonderful things, and we are capable of horror beyond imagining. And a lot of Steve's inspiration for darkness comes from real life stories.
The tour really hit that really hard today. Yeah, just thinking about all that and shining a light on it and not wanting to look away from it. I think that's one thing. Some people look at some of the stuff he writes about and it's like, how could you talk about this? How could you dive into this? And it's because it's there. It exists. And if we don't look at it, it goes unnoticed and continues happening.
And one of the things that's funny, I joke about cannibalism, but one of the other really tough things was Bill Hodges, one of Bill Hodges' books, and I decided, okay, every serial murder that he mentions, I'm going to list in my, because I did a small concordance for that, I'm going to list briefly what they were. And oh my goodness, you can't even believe we all know, because you read about like, how did someone think of doing that to you? What happened in that person's mind? But that is also part of our reality. It's the dark part, but it's there.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's all kinds of horrible stuff that happens in it, right?
Yes.
But the thing that affected me the most on my recent reread of it was the father killing his kid with the recoilless hammer. And like that, I think that's clearly something that he's still thinking about too, because in 11/22/63 he brings that back. It's like, we're going to show that again. It's like, out of all the things we could talk about after coming back to Derry, it's like, this is the one I'm going to shine a light on, because this is a horrible, horrible thing.
Yeah. And one of the things that was funny, we talked about Derry. Derry shows up, and so even if it's not the main setting, it shows up. But I was thinking about, do you remember the scene early on in it where it's two men, one of them's from Derry, his boyfriend is from Derry, and he has an I Love Derry hat, and he ends up being killed. For me, that tore my heart out, because you think, what a tragedy. But that's like the darkness of humanity, as well as, like you said, there's the good. I don't want to get just But this is something we deal with when we read horror.
Yeah, I think the quote from 11/22/63 that keeps coming back to me, that I unfortunately can't think of it exactly right now, but when he's talking about dancing with Sadie, and it's like, two people dancing against the dark, and like this beautiful quote. I wish I could remember it. Just like beautiful
pretty
quote.
Well. That's good. It's a beautiful book, and it is powerful in the doorways in it. And that idea to be able to go back to you always start at the same moment and change things, and what will happen if you change things? That was really powerful. I don't want to give a spoiler.
Yeah, Matt hasn't finished it. I made Matt stop like 100 pages before the end.
The worst possible spot.
Oh my God. Yeah, but it's amazing. I will not say anything. I almost said I'm really glad I did.
Who killed Kennedy?
Shake. Yeah, so I mean, I feel like we're jumping around like crazy, but I'll always go back to the Dark Tower, because I love the Dark Tower. So
It's the linchpin of the time-space continuum. So of course, everything roads lead to the tower.
And I guess, how do you feel about that? That's a great segue of he's obviously continues to go back to the story and the tower over and over again, and just like his wanting to kind of tie all the books together in small ways and in big ways. I think reading Billy Summers and you get the overlook back there briefly again.
Yes, I love that moment. And actually, I don't know if anyone, the hallway of where I'm staying, there were no lights. The overlook. And I pretended to be. Just looked at me. But for that minute,
Yeah, so I guess what is kind of your favorite way that like the macro verse, I guess for lack of a better term, always kind of ties into each other, and the books touch each other and bounce off each other?
I love that moment when I'm reading a different book and I see a reference back there, and sometimes it's really small. It's reasserting that connectedness of the multiverse, which I love.
But again, it's never a one like, if you didn't read this other book about it, you won't understand.
No, exactly. It's something else completely. But it's there. When you're ready to see it, it's there and it's waiting for you.
I love that you brought the idea of folklore into the Dark Tower, because I never thought of the Dark Tower as folklore until this moment. But it's it all connects in that kind of way in my head anyway. and I feel like I'm going to be referencing this conversation a bunch of times.
Oh, great! That's wonderful.
Yeah, like that's a perfect lens to look at the way he likes to connect things, and like the reason for these allusions for other things feels very similar to the reason those allusions are present in folklore. Not that I'm a folklorist, but just like to gesture it in a direction of like remember this, and the connotations that thing brings. Gonna just drip that in here so that reference is there.
Arthur Eld. When you think about Arthur Eld, King Arthur.
Yeah.
When you think about Maryland, and you have, you have Mordred, you have, one of those great stories of their imagination in this part of the world. The Arthurian cycle that's there.
Yeah, I mean, he made it the center of his universe, but he kind of made it the center of storytelling as well.
Exactly.
He's talking about all storytelling, all the experience of people telling each other stories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I was thinking about going through the keyhole and the various stories, Tales of Eld. I loved that. With the pictures of the Billy Bumblers. Oh, that's one thing, actually, just one of those little moments I was told that when it came, people would write about, the Dark Tower when it was unfinished, and they said, you can kill anyone you want, but don't kill Orion. Death threats, do not kill Orion. Who's going to get in trouble for that one? But, yeah. Well, that's complete aside, I'm sorry. I love that.
I know for the saying anything right now. Who among here hasn't read all the books?
Oh,
We didn't say. Yeah, and there's people who haven't finished the Dark Tower, but I did want on the record us all just agreeing that the ending of the Dark Tower, we're not going to say what it is, but we're not going to say it's perfect.
yes.
Yeah, Dad. My dad doesn't like the way.
Oh, really? I've had long conversations with people about the ending.
I can introduce you if you want.
Different perspectives on that ending. But I loved it. I thought it was perfect.
So did we.
Yeah.
And another long conversation, when Stephen King comes into the books and stuff. I love that. And I've had long conversations about that too.
Did you know about that before? I mean, did you see the manuscript of that happening before it was out?
Mm-hmm.
What was your reaction to that?
I really liked it. I liked that. Pirandello's, is it 6 Characters in Search of an Author? Have you ever read that play? And it's very similar. It's these the characters of an abandoned play show up in the theater and they say, here we are. And it was that interaction, the characters actually coming into the life of an author. And then here they are, they come into, Roland and Eddie come into Stephen King's but yeah, it's really powerful. And, it's one of those things, I guess it's that question of, sometimes we talk about metafiction, fiction. I do love that idea of the author engaging with the characters, and then also that question of the characters existing outside the author. And I think a lot of writers, and anyone out here who's a writer, and I know there's lots of you out there, your characters do feel like they're outside of you on one level. You're interacting with them, and I think with Stephen King, with Roland is very, very real for him. I mean, we've all probably been haunted by him. I have been.
Yeah, I think the reason it succeeds too is he's so lovably self-deprecating about himself. When we first see the 70s version of himself, he's not kind to himself at all. He's pretty harsh on himself, and so it never comes off, despite the fact that he literally kind of puts himself at the center of the existence of the world. It never comes off as conceited. It never comes off as self-aggrandizing.
But in a weird way, it is the case because without Steve, there was no Dark Tower. It's his book, so it's that I thought was really interesting, the relationship between the author and his creation.
Yeah, the way that his near-death experience defines the series and changes the series. Yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, I
think
really
it's
like
so
that
cool.
too.
Like, yeah, it becomes it's a story about stories. It's a story about everything, and it's also a story about Stephen King, literally and figuratively. Yeah.
And I guess that every writer's internal world is different because it is taking place inside of them, and it is their story as well as the stories they're telling.
Yeah, I like that idea because, I mean, yeah, textually he's the center of the universe, but it's like, we're all the center of our own universe. Like we pretend not to be as self-absorbed as we really are. and I think he's just being honest about it. Like, I was going to say earlier when we were talking about horror and his willingness to go places that are just incredibly dark. It's like he doesn't seem to have that voice that's like, oh, is this going to be marketable? Is this a marketable idea? It's like, he will write things that you're just like, I don't,
And he's written about that a lot, like, no one's going to want to read this, and then it's really big. But it's also interesting about Roland and Stephen King, and it's very clear that Roland doesn't like me much, and I thought, oh, yes, he does. But no, it's quite an amazing back and forth between the character and the author.
I don't know how a character would ever really like their author to putting
Well,
them
exactly.
in
It's
terrible
like,
situations.
You killed off everyone. How did you do this?
One of my favorite things Matt said when we were going through the books the first time is we were always like constantly trying to define what Ka is, because I think it's like it's very simple to just say it's fate, but I think it's so much more than that in the books. And one of the things he said that I loved is that it's kind of storytelling in general. It's like the things that have to happen in a story to make a good story are usually like really tough on its characters, and like this idea that like that Ka is just the story dictates that this person has to die now. Sorry, the story dictates that you have to do this. The story
And
dictates
it's like
that,
life, because people are taken whether we want them to be taken or not.
yeah, and then some aspect of it is in our control. We have free will, and I think at least the way that he writes about his process, his characters have free will within his mind. They make choices, and they make the wrong choices sometimes, and they make the right choices sometimes.
It's really interesting because when you talk about Ka, you also talk about Katet, and you talk about Kef. Boy, good thing we all read Doctor. Who is this person? But I was thinking about that with, Ka and Katet and the binding of Kef, which is also water, which is the stuff of life. You don't have water, you die. And so it's those really fundamental relationships, and that also influences how we see Ka.
No, yeah, that's great. I mean, that's such the content is such a key part of that whole series, and I mean the vehicle for transformation and growth for Roland.
Exactly.
Like that's,
and it's not just people you love. You think of Katet as those you love, those who bound you by destiny, bound you by fate, but you also have the darkness of things that pushes your fate forward.
It's such a great just concept that I now just shamelessly import that into what we talked about.
I'll be very pleased and very proud.
It's like English just needs to adopt the phrase "katet." It's just so useful.
I catch myself just saying it sometimes to people that don't know what I'm talking about.
This is probably a good crown for just. Thank you, Sai.
Well, that is something. I mean, I'm curious what you think about that. Like the language of his stories, like not just inventing words like in Dark Tower, like he does, but I think like one thing that we've definitely noticed over the course of what we've done here is that he has phrases that exist. Like you said, Dun Bun can't be undone.
I love that.
He always seems to invent like a phrase or a couple phrases that he repeats multiple times throughout each of his books that like give it kind of flavor and uniqueness. And is Dun Bun your favorite of this kind of phrases?
It's one that always comes back to me. It's Dun Bun can't be undone. And I just say it in my own head. But then you think, But
maybe see, maybe no.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting because I think those phrases can define a character, can define a mood, or a book.
Yeah, it's like a cheat code. It's really good. It's like it knows it too.
Just because you know the cheat code doesn't mean that you can do it. Like, it's hard to learn from King as a writer for me because I'm just like, yeah, I see what he's doing. That doesn't mean I can do it.
I know exactly what you mean. I think as you read it, you're absorbing a lot more probably than you realize, and I feel like taking that deep dive into the books, I've learned so much as a writer, and a lot of it, I think, it's almost like you absorb it on some other level. It's like not this part of your mind, it's deeper. How you tell the story, what can you do as a storyteller? What can I let myself run free with, and I feel stupid, but I'm going to run free with it, and maybe it will make the story better. Because that self-consciousness stops us so often, doesn't it? You just think, oh my God, what will anybody else think about this? And sometimes the things that make us most self-conscious are the things that have the greatest appeal, but we're revealing something about ourselves. And I think the fearlessness of what he'll talk about, the topics or the characters, that's amazing. And I think I've learned a lot about that, to be fearless. Tries to delete later.
Yeah. It also gives him the freedom to reinvent himself over and over.
Yes,
and
completely.
have each of his books be so wildly different. Some of my favorite authors, I feel like I read 3 of their books and I'm like, okay, I think I can get this person now. And then you kind of get bored of them. And this is even literally some of my favorite authors. But he's just constantly changing. I think that's the other sort of flip side of the fearlessness is like, I can just start going in a direction and I don't even know where I'm going, but I'll figure it out. It's very rare.
And it's really interesting looking at Steve's stories, and you look at the early stories, and you see his love, of course, of horror, but of science fiction and crime and fantasy. It's all there. If you go back and what he was reading, the books he was reading, the comics he was reading as a kid, the love of all those different genres and serious fiction and poetry, and that you can move into so many different areas. You don't have to, as a reader or a writer, you don't have to stick to one. But I love that too. Because it's always an adventure,
Yeah, I think we've been reading Stephen King basically nonstop for like 5 years, and I think if we didn't have that kind of genre jumping and changing of I think we would have got, even though we love the books, it would have gotten kind of stale eventually. We're just talking about it every week, so yeah.
But you're moving, aren't you?
Constantly,
different ways of being.
Yeah, we're about to get into, like I said, he hasn't read any of the crime stuff, so after we finish 11/22/63, we're moving into his crime fiction.
Oh, that's great.
And I love that. I love it so much. He's so good at it. It's just like, it feels effortless sometimes. It just feels like, I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to do awesome. Yeah.
I think at one point you were like, is there a genre you'd like to see King tackle? And I was like, I'd love to see him do a crime novel. And you were like, good news.
That's great.
I mean, the 2010s and on, that's really been, what's interesting and the most is the crime stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And then the supernatural and the horror will creep in.
Yeah.
When you think about it. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Well, I think unless you had anything else, I think we were going to do some Q&A for. Do we have another microphone? Okay.
Oh,
yeah, I think
you guys were really good characters.
I think we've got about half an hour, so do we want to line up? How do we want to?
I think people can raise their hand.
Okay, we can have just people raise their hands and ask Robin some questions. Or not say yes, but
Good boy, boy.
she's cooler.
Hi. Thank you so much for everything, all of you. I know you guys talked about this a little bit, but I'm always curious what people think when you recommend the Dark Tower series to people. The order is so interesting because you can start with the Gunslinger, which I might not want to. You might not want to recommend that people start with the Gunslinger, and then when you get to Went Through the Keyhole, where does that go? Do you put it at the end when you really want to read another story, or do you put it where it's supposed to go? So I was just curious, like, if you guys, you talked about this in the podcast for sure, but like, do you have a different opinion on this now, and what's your opinion?
That's a really good question, because there was all this discussion about, I think we really wanted, you could read it separately. You could read it as 4.5, or you could read it as the first one. And it goes, I love that because it went back to Rowland's early life. And I love that period. And that's a question I still don't know. I love The Gunslinger, and I think it's a great way to begin. But a lot of people, they get into this series when they get to the drawing of the three. And that's what grabs them, and they're like, okay, I'm going to go back. What do you both think? Where do you recommend it?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been publishing order for me.
Right,
I think the first time you read it, start from the beginning, work in publishing order, and then after that you can get crazy. Like I know there's people that like have the order that mixes in all the other references in, like they read Salem's Lot before they get to Wolves, and they do all that. And I think all that's really cool and fun. But I think, and this is kind of why I did it with Matt, that the publishing order first, I think, is the best way to do it. And I get, like, I was very worried about how Matt was going to react to The Gunslinger, because it is so different. It's just so different. I've fallen in love with that book the more I've read it. Like, it's one of those ones that, especially the audiobook, I can just throw that on, and it sounds like poetry a lot of the time.
Well, I think it is. I think you can see that when he was writing it, he was reading a lot of poetry. He was a graduate student. He was reading many different things, and it really influenced his style.
But I do think, like, you could do Drawing of the Three, and it's just like, king. Like, that's just
immediately,
and there's so much energy in that book. It's so fun.
Movement. And,
I get wanting to jump to that right away. I totally do.
Yeah, completely.
It's good to warn you, hey, this book is going to go some messed up places. I think my main reason for agreeing with publishing order is that if you don't do that, then you sort of leave, Eddie and Susanna and Jake for these stretches, and which can be fine, but I think I would personally find that frustrating.
Yeah, and I do think the way Wind Through the Keyhole is written, it does feel like an author returning to characters that he had kind of set aside and put behind, and like, so reading it at the end is like, we've also kind of put these characters behind us. Now we get to see a snapshot of them one last time, and I just think it works best at the very end.
And it's the first one where we hear Roland speak for himself. I love that. So all of a sudden, there's Roland's voice. He's telling us a story directly. It isn't filtered through the narrator. And I really thought that was interesting. And I think in a weird way, maybe it took that long to get to that place. I really like that. And it's interesting as well when you're talking about reading it in order. When you read it in order and you meet the very hard Roland first, and then you move back to his childhood and you see, whoa, this is why he became this. And then you go back and then his redemption or his struggle with that becomes even more powerful. So I do like the order.
And I can't officially talk about anything, but do you think he'll go back to the Dark Tower?
I hope so. I really hope so. Please.
Any questions?
Am I feedback? Yeah, okay. Hi. So I have a comment first and then a fairly easy question. I just wanted to say that I consider myself to be a pretty avid reader and like reading, but I've never been able to explain or talk about anything. And you guys have said in basically all of your podcasts from Warren to now that like your goal is to get people to understand why they like something. And I just wanted to say thank you because you do a very good job. Basically, you guys are better than any English teacher I've ever had, so it's kind of plus. But since I have to ask a question, my fairly easy standard one, is there like a king trope that just makes you roll your eyes or like laugh whenever you see it? Just something that's like, maybe not like, you don't hate it, but it's like, okay, come on. Or all three.
What do you think? Gosh. Sorry.
Season Yahoobies. I do think sometimes when King talks about sex, it makes me feel a little awkward. But I don't know if I'd roll my eyes, but.
I don't roll my eyes so much as I just think it's funny that so many of his characters are like 6'4", and it's just like, but the way he writes it is not correctly expressing the way in which everyone treats 6'4" guys. That's all.
I'm going to have to think, that's another one I'm going to wake up at 4 in the morning. I should have said that.
Yeah.
Legally, all of a sudden I'll spout something. I don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, there are definitely themes that come up again, and you say, there it is again. But I'm going to think about that one. Good question.
Like, why are so many of his characters authors?
Yeah. I actually really like that.
It's a great excuse for all the characters to be like extremely well read.
I think what makes me sad sometimes it's often love ends up with the death of someone, and that always please let some you can see the book on it, but it happens over and over, where the love never has a chance.
Yeah, I think Jerry mentioned this on the tour, but like, what does Tabby react to something? Well, this woman's gonna die again.
But the loving dies. I think that for me is let her live, please. It's funny.
I'm going to kind of move in the back.
Yeah.
I just wondered, we know, of course, that the Dark Tower obviously took a very big change after Stephen King's accident. Presumably he doesn't have the site and didn't know that that's where the story was going to go. So I'm just curious, did you ever discuss like how he kind of saw the story going before, that had to just change everything so completely?
That's a great question. I've never asked Steve about that, but one thing that is very, very creepy, go back through his novels and see how many times someone said my phone. And it's creepy. It happens over and over, and you think, on some level, was there some way to think? Oh, how often in Steve King's novels, early on, well before his accident, someone's hit by a car. And you just see it over and over, and you think, and it brings up that question of cop. Yeah, The Shining, right?
Complete conjecture, but I do think the very end of the story probably always was going to end it that way.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, I think so, yeah.
So in my role as the reductive stick in the mud science, if he goes on these walks all the time, he's constantly going on walks, and he's seeing cars go by all the time, thinking, my car almost hit me. I should do that to the character.
Oh no, what happened to me?
He did write about in Pet Sematary, the cars flying down and his son almost being hit, and how terrifying that was, and so that is also those moments of death rushes past.
Yeah, I haven't reread that one since I had kids. I don't think I'm gonna.
Oh, I can understand that completely. Wait till they're grown.
Hello. Thank you again, first of all, for taking the time out. This is awesome. I've been having a lot of fun with this. Knowing all of the different authors that King pulls into his texts, and I love the way that Scott says it too, where it's never like a pretentious thing, right? It's always like, enjoy this with us, if you'd like to. I just recently learned that Faulkner's middle name is Cuthbert, and that blew my freaking mind, so
It's Cuthbert.
I always say
perpetually mispronounce that name. Is till the end. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I'm with you on. I'm just gonna call him Cuthbert. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna do it that way. I know it's Cuthbert, and I do. That's just how I read it the first time. Anyway, do you have any authors in your mind that, like, you may have stumbled across, like, you might have had to ask him throughout the process, like, hey, was this a Faulkner thing in your mind? Was this a, because I'm so curious, I'd love to be able to dig in a little deeper and find an author that I have never pulled yet. Does that make sense?
It does, definitely. And that is something I've never spoken about with Steve. And when I was doing the concordance, I was pulling out all the authors that he mentioned. I was amazed. Authors, characters, people who'd influenced him. And, the lists were so long, but I've never asked that. So I should. Thank you.
Follow-up question. Cuthbert?
I always, in my head, say Cuthbert, and I know it should be Cuthbert.
But why?
I don't know.
Can you ask him why?
Listen. Hey, here's some questions for you. Do you give Cuthbert?
It's Cuthbert.
I think Steve says Cuthbert, but I say Cuthbert. So.
And I think, I can't remember which, because the two audiobook, they say it differently, right?
I've listened to the audiobooks to try and various high speech terms. Okay, how exactly is that pronounced? Because when they were working on the TV and film tie-in, one that wasn't made way back, and they were saying, okay, how do you pronounce these things? I'm going to have to listen to the audiobooks. It's clear in my head, so just finding out all these, and there are so many different ways to pronounce
I think
words.
In the book itself, I think it ends up being Cuthbert, because I think Shimi, it's does it phonetically, but
it is.
it just doesn't sound right.
And I still say Cuthbert. I just hear that in my head.
I was just going to mention Holly is probably my favorite character of King ever. And on that note, you mentioned a Bill Hodges concordance. Is that published?
Yeah, it's actually only an ebook, and we'll see if it. Now that there's Holly, who knows? But yeah, it's an ebook, and I think that it's with Scribner, but it's just ebooks. And it's just Bill Hodges. It's not the later Holly books. But yeah, there was a period when I first finished it, and they let me give it out for free, which was great. But they stopped that. Scribner stopped that. I have to check and see if it's still available. But I would love to get that back out, because it was great to watch those characters develop and to deal so closely with Holly and Bill Hodges and those cases they worked on. How creepy they were. It really is that going over into the crime. It is crime.
Hi, I recently read your Dark Tower comics, and I thought they were phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm just wondering if there's any other King works outside of the Dark Tower that you would want to make comic adaptations for, like how you would do that.
Wow. Yeah. There have been quite a few. I mean, there's The Stand that's out. There are quite a few. There have been different short fictions that have been out. That's a tough question, because there are so many, because the stories are so vivid. You just think, wouldn't that be great to have that on the page? Think about it. Wouldn't that be amazing? Think about that. Pennywise. I'm trying to think about others. The little doctors, wouldn't they be amazing? You think about the things that really would work in comics, and some of these monstrous creatures are just, I wish I could draw, because that would be I'd be too, I can imagine my little stick figures, but it would be amazing. One of the things I love working with comic book artists is that they take the thing you've had in your mind and they put it on the page and they give it a life. And it's just incredible. Yeah, that would be a lot of, I would love to finish the Dark Tower. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. We'll see if there's a film. We're going to wait and find out about that. But yeah, I think it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we all know there wasn't really a Dark Tower film.
Yeah, there might yet be. Just
Hi, so I've got a short question for Matt and more of a pain in the ass question for Robin. But Matt, I'll just say them back to back. You've tantalized us with the idea that you write fiction from time to time. I want to know when you're going to let us actually read it.
Yeah. This is a pain in the ass question. That's a very fair question. I'll take this as well-meant peer pressure. Yeah, I've got a bunch of short things that I've tried to get published. So my like non-joking answer is I would really like to actually get something published traditionally and not just like take advantage of the fact that I have a platform, which I could obviously do. But do it the
right way. Patreon level.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, like I thought of that, like that would be easy, right? But I want to like do the thing, right? When you're a kid, you read and you imagine it being published, right? And that. So there's a few things I tried to get published and it's never quite made it.
keep sending out. Do you send out multiple times?
No, I'm very lazy.
You have to. You know, if one place takes it or doesn't take it, but then I said, oh, kind of liked it, but not for us. Or even if they don't say anything, keep sending out, keep sending out, keep sending out. Like what Steve said about, you know, he had the big nail and he put all his rejection slips on it. It's what every writer goes through. It never gets easier to get those rejections, but it's so important to keep sending out. Keep sending out, keep sending out, keep sending out.
We'll do that.
Yeah, seriously.
That's so good because that was kind of half of my pain in the ass question. You're a seasoned storyteller. You've been doing this for a while. You're good at it. What was your early journey like, kind of getting over that initial mountain that I think every writer faces, which is
self-doubt.
Going from that, like, these are stories that I just write for me and don't show anybody, to I actually show these to people in the hopes of getting somewhere professionally. Like, what was that process like for you emotionally?
Very slow. Very slow. And my first publications were poetry. And I think in part because it wasn't, in school, the teachers didn't really like poetry that much, so I didn't get as self-conscious about it. It was mine, it was my secret. And I worked with Constance Hunting at the University of Maine, and she was a poet, so she really encouraged me. That was great. I married a poet, that helped. And so I would send that out, but fiction, I was so afraid. The rejection, the fear of, like, why does anyone want to read what I have to say? And I think working and reworking, and I didn't really start to send stories out until quite late, many, many years. And be patient with it. So you write and you sending out? Yeah. Keep sending out. Find some readers that you trust, that you get feedback from. But if they say things you disagree with, trust yourself. Because sometimes it's something else. Like, they'll say, oh, there's this I don't like. And you think, I really like that. I'm going to take another look, and maybe there's just something else. I'll rejig a little bit, and that works. Have faith, hard as it is, and keep going. And that's, I think, one of the things I've taken away from working with Steve King for so long is just to keep going. Think how many rejections he got. See how he grew. And we all grow the more we write. Keep going. It's so hard, but it's so rewarding when you get that story in print.
You and me, Matt, let's go.
Yes, seriously. Do it. So important.
So, before you were talking about how Holly's, over the course of the books, had a slowly growing group of friends, as well as the fact that you can see her growth as a character across the books, and I think those two are intrinsically related.
I agree.
And honestly, when looking, I've recently been going through them in the audiobooks. I have not read Holly yet, but I've noticed that it feels more like a realistic version of what Stephen King first did over the Dark Tower series with the Quartet. It's more
really interesting.
related.
I think you're 100% right. That's a really good observation.
Now I say that, and we've seen groups like this over the course King's books throughout. There's the Coctet, Losers Club, Holly Gibney's friend group over the course of the books, as well as like the trio we meet in Doomakey.
Yeah.
For everyone on stage, is there a specific group from these books that is your favorite?
From the content, I love both Roland's quartets, and I think his youthful quartet I really love because they're idealistic, and I think they have a really special place in me. And I love Eddie and Susanna and Jake, and maybe that early quartet echoes in them, and so yeah, that's it. And also, of course, the Losers Club. Love them. What about you guys?
The Long Walk crew, the core crew.
Right.
It's like, in some ways, by far the darkest quartet, and they're barely even friends, right? I mean, in fact, they're all doomed from the beginning, and they know it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But for me, for some reason, that makes it more poignant, more powerful.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I think Roland's quartet has to be my answer. All those characters are individually incredible, and then putting them together and putting them through everything they went through, I love them. I love them so much. Of course, Losers Club I love as well. I think everyone has a loser they identify with. But yeah, it's gotta be Eddie and Susanna and Jake and Roland and Ori.
Can't forget Ori. You'll get hate mail.
Hi. So first I have a little bit of a joke, is that I started reading The Dark Tower because I was anticipating the movie. Which was like a win overall for me. But my question was, I think Stephen King novels are notoriously hard to adapt to film. Just because some of the things that are in it, a lot of the more abstract concepts are really hard to represent visually. And I was just wondering if you encountered any of that in writing the comics. But it's kind of like a marriage of both the visual and the word.
Yes, and I really struggled with that. How do you take a story and tell it visually and get those layers in? It's a really good question, because it is really hard, and kind of cross your fingers and take that step and just hope. You try, what is it that moved me? How can I take this concept and put it in a series of images and in that kind of visual storytelling? And it was a real challenge. And I'm trying to think if there's a particular thing that really struck me. Sometimes the concept of evil in the way it works in the Dark Tower and things like Ha. Do you pull it into conversation? A lot of it I would find that, for these concepts, can I get it, squeeze it into conversation? And I know I only have that much space. And that's one of the things about writing comics, for those of you who've done it. You think there are a lot of words on a comic until you actually see the script and you think, wow, it's kind of like dialogue in a film where so much has to be in the movement of the camera. I have endless respect for people who can do this. This is so hard. But you just keep trying, and dialogue is a good thing. Or I remember working with a comic book artist, and they were saying, well, try to tell as much as you can in the images. And that's really hard, like the passage of time. And I felt like, wow, I really learned something when it's like the way the sun moves, you can see time going by. Or, a come and go story, having an image in the background. Like you do in a story, you'll mention something early on, and they don't know, but this is going to come back on them. But in a comic or to build that in visually somehow, and to learn a lot from the artists you work with, who are really skilled at this kind of thing. And with the comic sort of things, it was great. Is Jay Lee, who was the primary person I was working with. He is a storyteller as well. He'd written graphic novels, and he was really skilled with that. And the editors, one of the things as a writer, a good editor is worth the weight in gold. They will tell you, like, nope, didn't work. And they'll do it in a way that makes you feel like, oh, I can go back and rewrite that. It's okay. I'm not a complete failure. But, so the editors help a lot to try and get you to reach that goal of telling that part of the story, especially if they really know the material that you're working with. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
it was great.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I'll let you remind there. Thank you again for all being here, getting all of us together. This is wonderful. Great.
Great job.
Yeah. So, my question, whenever I read King, even though it's so hard to translate into a visual medium on some of these, I still see it in my head very visually. I see these things as scenes, just words sometimes. Is there, and this is for all of y'all, is there a certain scene or a certain line that just kind of surprises you of how much it comes back into your mind over the years? I have a few of those myself. I didn't know if anything.
What are yours? First of all, I'm curious.
The one that comes back to me seems unusual. So on the stand, Stu is telling a story about someone driving up to the gas station late one night, and it was a man he knew shouldn't be alive at all. And in my head, it was Elvis until the big reveal, and it wasn't. I'm not going to try and ruin it for anyone who hasn't read it, but it just haunted me. It gave me the chills because it was perfect, and it wasn't what I expected, but it's exactly what it should have been.
That's wonderful.
See, I definitely imagine things in my head when I read, and so I'm really struggling because there's probably like 500 things that I could give. I don't know. Anybody else want to say anything?
Visually, I'm kind of weird that I don't like. I think I've talked about this before, but I don't like see the scenes as they play out. I kind of like I have emotional feelings. Like I'm not actually like visualizing the scene as I'm reading. But I mean, as you were asking your question, I don't even know if this is what you meant. The quote that immediately jumped to my head was one that Jody put on the quotes on the thing last night in Salem's Lot when they're talking about the way news travels on the telephone wires. Like is a thing that like I just since I read that, like that keeps coming back to me. It's like the way he describes how news and bad deeds and bad things travel along the telephone wires as people communicate and gossip and all these things. I think it was just beautifully written, and I don't know, that just popped into my head. I think about that a lot.
It's such a great question because there were, you have ideas all linked that you think about when a question comes up, and one is talking to people about reading. And I'm a person who sees pictures on, but I've spoken, like you were saying, that yours is, you feel like the emotions, and there are some people that hear the words, and they're completely auditory, and so when they're reading, someone is telling them a story, and they're hearing it, and so everyone has this different style, and for me, I am definitely, like you're saying, I see scenes, and I can't believe that the first one, and the first King book that I read as a kid in Salem's Lot, and I can't believe I'm blanking on the names, the little boy who comes to the window. Oh!
Danny Glick.
Danny Glick! How could I forget Danny Glick? But that has haunted me my whole life. Danny Glick at the window. And then I was thinking, why? That's so resonant. And then I thought, you go back to Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights, Kathy at the window. And I thought, when I read Wuthering Heights, that terrified me. Let me in, I'm cold. Let me in, I'm cold. And I thought, boy, Steve, you read that book. Scarier than anything. And yeah, it wasn't. And so, yeah, Danny Cook. Although there are other things like Susan Delgado being burned, Charlie Tree, that really on him. But I think that early terror. Am I too quiet? I don't want to. I'm sorry. I don't want to. Like it was hissing, and I was like, oh no. But yeah, Danny. Like everybody tonight, you're going to go home and you're going to dream about Danny out the window.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, like a lot of the scenes that stick in my head of his are action scenes, which I think of as being particularly difficult to write and are often weak points for even successful writers. So like the Roland Scott's at, wiping out
Yes.
Actually what's funny is that you can complete that sentence with either a couple of different things, depending on which Scott that you're talking about. But I can just like see that, I just like play those in my head.
Yeah. Is there one particular?
The thingy.
Oh yes, yeah. Those thinnies are terrifying. Hungry. I love actually that scene where the thinny is trying to draw them in. It is kind of vampire, isn't it? Yeah. It is this thing. Ooh.
Here's time for one more. I think one more.
Hello. Besides Holly, who in Stephen King's universes is your favorite female character? Even if they're done dirty very, very often. Who's your favorite King character, female character, and why?
Who wants to go first?
I'll just give the easy answer, completely admitting that this is probably somewhat recency bias, but I'm really enjoying Sadie in Order 263.
Yes.
She's very fleshed out, and like I know her, And not to say that isn't the case typically, it is the case typically, but just, I don't know, she seems very deep, very human, believable. I mean, I don't know, everything you want out of a character.
I love Bev Marsh. I just love her so much. I think I don't know how else to answer this question other than her. I'd be being dishonest with myself, but she's incredibly well drawn. Like, you feel for her, you understand her, and her journey through these books. That book is just awesome. I love her.
Susan Delgado, she breaks my heart every time. She is devoted in her love, and is disappointed. And it's funny, it just came to me today in a weird way though. Doesn't she have her revenge? Roland never gets over her. So, there is that element. And boy, Susanna Dean has guts. Yeah. I love, she's another favorite, another strong character.
Both Susans.
Yes! Susan comes up, and someone else was like, why are the Susans? I don't know.
We gotta get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, I know, the mystery of Susan.
Some Susan in grade school.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. I think that's the end of this portion of the show.
We still have raffles.
Yeah, we still have raffles to announce. But I wanted to do something a little special that I'm going to surprise and embarrass my co-host here for. So, as you guys know, kind of the basis of the show was always I was the constant reader and Matt was the King newbie. That's kind of how we defined it from the very, very beginning. And Matt has now spent 5 years reading. He has talked about Stephen King more than many people do. So I thought it was about time that we officially allow him to graduate. And so what I had done, and I don't know if y'all are going to be able to see this very much, but I had a diploma. I thought about being a clapping down on my wife said that's too much. But it says Kingslingers University because I made up a school. We give him the official official title of constant reader. So congratulations to that. That's me. And that's Rob.
That's me.
Thank you.
That's how bad my signature is.
Who's this guy? You've got my secret first name on here. That's great.
Oh, you've earned it. You've earned it.
Yeah. It's on the Venmo. I can put this on my business card now. What's the abbreviation? JS?
Sure.
CI.
All right, everybody. I think that's basically what we're gonna do from here is just kind of hang out. I think. Yeah. Robin's
gonna sign. So
Sharon Kitchens is gonna be here signing some stuff as well. And we're just gonna be hanging out. So yeah, thank you all so much. We'll see you tomorrow. But other than that, we'll be hanging out here for I don't have a watch time. Long days and pleasant nights.